Hi, everybody. Well, I have to say that I never thought my life was going to turn out like this, talking to large groups of people about sex. But did your life turn out the way you thought it was going to turn out? No. So you just never know. So anyway, here we are. It is after lunch. I hope your belly's not too full to make you sleepy. Is this a little too loud? Can you turn the sound down just a wee bit? Is that better? Sounds a little echoey to me. Is that good? Okay. So you ready to talk about sex or hear me talk about sex and have some fun? I actually have a partner presenting with me. This is Victoria. She's my vulva puppet. And she has been the source of great wisdom to me for many years. And if you're lucky, she may speak to you afterwards. So, I have to step away from here because the crew is talking. All right, so today we're going to talk about how treatments affect intimacy and sexuality. And goodness knows, as Dr. Pegram was talking this morning, there are some really great new developments as far as treatment goes. So more lives are being prolonged and being saved, and they have a big impact on sexuality and intimacy. We're going to talk about all the aspects to our sexuality beyond just what happens in places like Miss Victoria. And then I'm going to share with you some inside-out practices. We're going to talk about communication, then I'm going to give you some tools, and then we're going to talk about your most powerful sex organ. Ready? Bring it on. Okay, we will bring it on. So first I want to tell you a little bit about me and why I think I'm qualified to be standing up here speaking and teaching to you. That's me when I was little. I loved being naked and running around the neighborhood. And my mother tells me that she had a hard time keeping clothes on me, and that I used to love to stand on the back porch and dance to entertain all the neighborhood kids. Well, little did I know that this would lead to me being a sex educator. But it seems like I was groomed for this position from an early start. And don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to get naked in here today. So I always thought, you know, I said my life didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to. I always thought that my life was going to be about driving around a big SUV filled with puppies and kids and living the happy, tranquil domestic life. And it didn't turn out that way. So I was 37 years old, and I had a big job in the corporate world, and I was single and dating. A marriage had just ended, and my biological clock was ticking loudly. So then we fast forward to my 37th birthday, and I was on my way out the door to go to a birthday party, and my phone rang. And it was my doctor, and she said those words to me that most of you have heard. You have breast cancer. And I literally dropped the phone and went numb and went into shock. And in that instant, my life just changed in ways that I didn't even imagine or couldn't even imagine. So I drove to this party. I don't have any memory of driving to the party. I walked inside and all these people shouted, "Happy birthday!" And I just burst into tears. And I just was sobbing in my friend's arms. And they just held me while I cried. They had no idea what I was crying about. And it was the first of buckets of tears I've shed. Anybody relate to that? So then suddenly, I was on this roller coaster. Right? You've been on this roller coaster. You have to make treatment decisions, and you have to make them fast. And you don't know what the long-range consequences of these treatment decisions are going to be, right? It's a scary time, and it's like being parachuted into a foreign country where you don't speak the language, to learn all this medical terminology and absorb all that while you're in the midst of the thoughts and feelings that Dr. Kogan was talking about this morning that we can't really control, right? So I'm happy to say that I made the right decisions, because here I am 23 years later. And along the way on that journey, there were many roller coasters, let me put it that way. So after treatment ended, and my treatment, I was lucky. I had 2 surgeries and radiation, and I had a partial mastectomy, but I still have part of my breast. But back then, reconstruction wasn't offered. And so it was a different world back then, 23 years ago. Technology and medicine have advanced so much since then. But when I finished treatment, and they said, come back in 6 months, then the next roller coaster began, which is, oh, now what? Right? You're left to go back and live in your life radically altered by cancer. So that was another big roller coaster for me. And there have been others. Another one was, I felt like because I was so young that I had been robbed of my opportunity to have babies. And like I said, I always thought I'd have a lot of babies. And it ended up that I did have a baby after my cancer treatments, and she's about to turn 20. So I'm very, very proud of that. So I have notes here just in case I forget to say anything to you. Oh yeah, so for more than 20 years, I have been on this journey of discovering life doesn't end with a cancer diagnosis, but who I thought I was as a woman and as an attractive woman really changed. And so I had a lot of work to do, a lot of inner healing work to do about that, because I just plain wasn't willing to not have a great life, and specifically a great sex life. Not that my sex life was all that great before, but all of a sudden, when something's been taken away, there's grief about that, but there's also an opportunity in that. So you know that Chinese symbol for crisis that is the two characters, it's danger and opportunity. Cancer is very dangerous, and there's also an opportunity in that. And so I really took that opportunity to do some very deep personal work and some healing work. And along the way with that, I feel like I've cracked the code on things like what sexy really is, and what is attractive and what's not. And what I thought was attractive and sexy wasn't what I was thinking. I discovered that it was something really different than that. And it may be different than what you're thinking too. So I've had to love and accept and forgive my body as it is now, radically changed by cancer and its treatments. And I've learned about what really matters and what not so much in life. And part of that for me has included discovering my life's work, which is Sexy After Cancer, and helping thousands of people have a happy and satisfying, intimate and sexual life after diagnosis. And I'm going to share some of that with you too. I have tons to say in this much time, so I'll give you as much as I can. So let's start off with a little survey, because I've had to do a lot of research about what brings me pleasure now. And I have to say that I think I have the greatest job on the planet that I created for myself, because I have to research about sex with that guy right there. And I've learned a lot. We've learned a lot together. Now I'm blushing. Okay, so I want to start off with a little research survey for you. So raise your hand if your sex life is rich and satisfying. Take a look around. There's some hands up. Great. Yay. She's a client. Now, raise your hand if you'd like to have more or better sex in your life. And you can raise your hand for more than one of these. Take a look around. Lots of hands up. Great. Okay. And now, raise your hand if sex seems like a distant memory to you. And look around. So, fantastic. She said her fantasy life is still full bore. Rock on. That's good. Okay, so no matter how you answered those questions, is that okay with you? And who do you go to talk to about this stuff? Where are the resources? And this is part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I just want to make sure I tell you everything here. Because there's not a lot of good resources around. And one of the best resources that you have is your own body. She says it wasn't always good, but now it is. So this can be a really sticky wicket, because it's an unanticipated result of many cancer treatments is a reduction in sexual function and sexual intimacy. How many of you have experienced that? Great. Okay. And the thing is, what I found is that my doctor didn't talk to me about that. And when I talk to doctors about it, they say two things. They say they don't have time these days with managed care, or they'll answer questions if their patients ask that. But a lot of women don't know it's coming. And so they don't know to ask, or they may be embarrassed to ask their doctor. And it's a big problem. There's research that shows that 40 to 90% of women experience sexual difficulties during and after treatment, and that 20 years post-treatment, 50% still do. And that, to me, is pretty shocking and heartbreaking, and doesn't have to be that way. So a Livestrong poll says that this is one of the top 3 survivor issues, along with, you know what the other 2 are? Chemo brain and fatigue. And I think they're all related, because our sexual energy is our life force energy. So, what do I do with my clicker? Oh, here it is. So let's talk about how treatments impact intimacy and sexuality. So we're going to also expand the possibilities of what sex is beyond insertion and fluid exchange, and then practice using your biggest sex organ. You know what your biggest sex organ is? Your brain! Right. Okay, so physiologically, surgical alterations to or removal of body parts, plus chemo and radiation and hormonal therapies all radically alter how our bodies function. I mean, you know this, right? Chemo and hormonal therapies are designed to terminate hormonal production, and it happens fast, and it causes sometimes irreversible menopause. And if you have pelvic radiation, that also impacts things. And all of that, the surgery, the radiation, the drugs, impact our libido, which is the urge to be sexual. And there's a big part of that libido that's hormonally driven, but not entirely. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then genital function changes as a lack of having the hormones in there. And what happens is our genital tissue becomes very friable and delicate, and it tears really, really easily. And you may feel like you're going like this. Stay away. I don't want to have that kind of pain. So for me, I just wasn't willing to live that way. So what I discovered is that there's a lot more to what I call the elixir of sexuality than just what happens with our hormones and in our genitals. So we're going to talk, oh, I missed this one. So what I want to say is that it can drive you crazy trying to figure out what to do and how to do this. Because, you know, your doctor might prescribe some antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications. I've also heard lots of women tell me that the doctor says, just use more lube. Does that help? Sometimes, right? But it's not really the problem. So let's talk about some other aspects to our sexuality. So first, there's our emotional status. So these physical changes that we undergo trigger emotions. And sudden menopause and loss of libido can leave us feeling less attractive, less desirable, less juicy, and less sexy. Can anybody relate to that? Are you going to sleep? I don't see too many hands going up. So that can lead to a nosedive in self-esteem and the sense of certainty about who we are. And even if we don't look different on the outside, we're very different on the inside. And then we have our psychological status. So what I mean by this is the thoughts that we have about what it means to have cancer, about what it means to be a woman with breast cancer, about the story that you tell yourself, because that story changes with a cancer diagnosis. And all kinds of thoughts, hidden thoughts and beliefs that we have about cancer that we've picked up for most of our life just rise up right in our face. And sometimes that story is not very pretty. So it's important to see what the story is and then be able to consciously and intentionally change that story and create a story that supports more of who you are. And spiritually, facing our mortality is enormous. I don't know anyone who has gotten a cancer diagnosis who hasn't thought, am I going to die from this? And for some of us, that question goes on for longer than for others. And questions like that can be an opening, and it can also cause shock waves to roll through ourselves and our loved ones as we contemplate those kinds of questions about what's important in life and what's not so important in life. And questions like, am I still a woman? And what matters to me? These are big spiritual issues to grapple with. And then, of course, there's physical questions. And I'm not talking here just about sexuality, although that is one of the physical aspects, but I'm talking about the level of pain that we have, the level of strength and flexibility that we have. So, for example, many cancer treatments weaken the pelvic floor muscles, and the pelvic floor holds up our whole lower body. It supports all our abdominal organs, it supports our spine, it helps us keep our belly in if we can, and as well as impacts our urinary continence and all kinds of things, including our sexual function. So it's really important to learn ways to strengthen those pelvic floor muscles because what happens there is the tissue, that friability means it loses elasticity, it loses moisture, and that causes it to tear easily. And then you just may plain old have fatigue and not know when you're going to feel good and when you're not. It's like Letitia was talking this morning about during radiation, you know, just walking along and she just wanted to lay down and go to sleep. You know, it just comes when it comes. And so it's just not so predictable anymore. And it feels like you can't maybe rely on your body in the same way as before. So when you all add that all together, then this is what I call the elixir of our sexuality, and that includes every aspect of who we are. So to simply look at the mechanics of sexuality leaves out way too many ingredients. And it takes more, much more than the mechanics of sex to wake up the sleeping beauty of our libido and our sexuality. So you may be thinking that your libido's gone, but I promise you, if you're alive, she's still here. She's just sleeping. And waking her up is an amazing process, and it takes some time, takes some work/play. I mean, you have to do some things to make that happen. But it doesn't require a Prince Charming to wake her up. So you don't need a partner to do this. And it doesn't need to be a man. It doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. This can be done. So let's take a look now at some of the elements of libido and sexiness, which helps to build a strong inner foundation. Where do we begin for this? So this is the inside-out practices that I mentioned in the beginning. So it's about beginning with the work to accept, forgive, and love your body as it is now, changed by cancer and its treatment. So here are some things to do. So you might want to take notes during this, because this, what I'm going to say is, there are little cues on the slides, but not all the parts. So if you want to remember this, then take some notes. So the first is mirror practices. And this is a very advanced spiritual practice, and it's a very powerful way to begin to love yourself again. And it's like this image. It's literally looking into the mirror. So here's the way it works. I'm going to describe it to you, and then I'm going to recommend that when you go home today that you actually start this practice. So it's a 30-day practice. And the reason I suggest 30 days is because the science shows that it takes 21 days to imprint a new habit on your brain. And that's what you're doing here. So I like to add a few days just to stack the deck in your favor. So it's 30 days. And if you miss a day, you have to start at day 1 again. So it has to be 30 consecutive days. And what you need is you need a mirror and a timer and a box of tissues and a journal if you're a journaler. And what you do is you commit to having this date with yourself for 5 minutes a day. So 5 minutes isn't much time to have this extraordinary experience. And what you do is you literally stand in front of the mirror and you look into your eyes and you breathe. And as you look into your eyes, you open your heart to yourself. You call on your compassion. You call on your kindness. Now, most of us don't look in the mirror this way. We might look in the mirror when we're putting on makeup, if we wear makeup, or combing our hair, or brushing our teeth, making sure we don't have spinach in our teeth before we go out. But it's all looking at ourselves with a critical eye, right? So this may feel a little uncomfortable at first, because you may not ever have connected with yourself in this way. So here's what you do is you stand and you look at yourself in the mirror and you breathe, and then you say these 3 words: I love you, and your first name. So I would say, I love you, Barbara. Now, the reason for the tissues is because when I did this the first time, the first thing that happened was this really loud voice in my head said, there's nothing lovable about you. Oh, no, I don't love you. This is a crock, right? And tears, because I was mad and angry and thought I was lying, and I realized how disconnected I was from myself. So I wiped my tears, and I continued to stand there and look into my eyes and say, I love you, Barbara. And you do that for 5 minutes until the timer rings. And the reason for the timer is because 5 minutes can seem like 5 hours. So this way you don't have to think about the time. So I promise you that if you do this for 30 days, your relationship with yourself will shift dramatically. Because the bottom line is, if you don't love yourself, you're not going to believe it when anybody else says that to you, right? You're going to think they're lying. So that's mirror practices. Now, the next area is forgiveness. And there are many, many forgiveness practices. And you might think, well, there's nothing to forgive. You know, this just happened. Life goes on. But stop and think about it for a moment. Because maybe you want to forgive your body for getting cancer. Maybe you want to forgive your surgeon for altering your body or removing parts of your body. Maybe you want to forgive your oncologist for the drugs that have these long-range side effects. If you believe in God, maybe you want to forgive God. I don't know, but whatever it is, there are things to forgive. And forgiveness is a process. It's not a one-time event. So there's lots of practices. This is one I particularly like. This is a prayer from the Ho'oponopono tradition in Hawaii. And what they do with this prayer is they play this lovely music, Hawaiian music, and then they sing this, pray it like a chant. And it's, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and thank you. So let's all say that together. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and thank you. So that's a relatively simple practice, but repeated over time, it can go really deep. So check and see if there's forgiveness that would be helpful to you. And then the third one, you may wonder about this. This is very related to what Dr. Kogan was talking about. So the average person thinks about 60,000 thoughts a day. And 5 to 10% of those thoughts are conscious thoughts that we choose. The other 90 to 95% of those thoughts are unconscious, the ones that she was talking about that just happen. We've picked them up from the moment we were born. We absorb what's around our environment, and the message we hear are like little sponges. And by the time we're an adult, that's our belief systems. It's like our operating system, and we just think that's the way life is. Now, most of us have a really strong inner critical voice. And if you don't think you do, it's the voice inside that's saying, no, she's wrong, I don't have that. That's your inner critic. It's as if you have a radio station playing in your brain that the call letters are KFUK, which is all criticism all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you haven't tuned in for a while, you tune back in and it's right there, the same old loops are going. So what I'm suggesting is that you be more mindful about your thoughts. There was talk about mindfulness this morning. And that every time you find yourself thinking a judgmental or a critical thought, you stop, just like Dr. Kogan said, and replace it with a positive thought. I love you works really great. There's also other things that might be messages that are important for you to hear. Things like, I'm beautiful, I'm sexy, I'm healthy. Whatever they are for you. And so what you're doing over time as you repeat these positive messages to yourself when these negative one comes up is you're creating a new radio station, which is called KLUV, all love all the time. So then when you find yourself in a bad space, then you can simply start to change the channel. So this working with the mind is a really important and big practice, and I have a gift I want to offer you. So if you have your smartphone, if you turned it off, like Karen advised this morning, just write this down. Otherwise, if you have your smartphone, take it out right now and key into www.keynote, www.sexyaftercancer.com/BCC. And if you put in your name and your email address, when you get home in your inbox, you'll find a special report that I've written about 7 different areas to work with your thoughts to transform your life. Because it's a very powerful and big area to work in, and it's more than I have time to talk with you about today, but I want to make that gift available to you. So working with your mind is really a key in building that strong inner foundation. So then we come back to more practices, and the next one is to learn your body as it is now, changed by cancer. So my suggestion with that is that you look at your body in the mirror differently than you just did in the mirror practices. You might want to do it naked or in some lingerie. But the idea is to look at your body and really see and accept how it is now, because it's not going back to the way it was before. So accepting that and making peace with that is really important. And then you can start to explore with touch what feels good, what not so much. Because as a result of the treatments we've had, we have some areas where it feels good to be touched, some where it's numb, some where it's painful. And it's important to really know all that stuff so that when you know what brings you pleasure, then you can either pleasure yourself when you want to have intimate time with yourself, or you can communicate that to your partner so that they know. It's like you make a little map of all the pleasure zones in your body. It's really fun. And we have pleasure zones all throughout our body. So when you're doing this, explore your entire body. Include your breasts or where your breasts were, your genitals, the bottoms of your feet, the pelvic area, everything. All from the perspective of curiosity and exploration. Because a lot of us think we really know our bodies, but one of the things that I see is that in a lot of cancer treatments, we actually leave our body. It's a coping strategy. And then we forget that we're gone and we don't know how to come back and we may feel a little numb. Well, touch really helps to come back into your body. So then, gently and gradually introduce sexual touch, and only when you're ready. So the thing is, most of us are really starved for just kind, intimate touch that has nothing to do with sexuality. So, you know, most of the touch that we have when we're having sex has to do with, you know, something like that or something like that, and that's supposed to get us turned on, but it doesn't really, does it, Victoria? No. So once you start to learn what feels good about you and explore it with beginner's mind, like it's a whole new thing, then some interesting things can happen because a whole new world can open up for you. So I'm going to tell you a little story about my daughter. I mentioned that she's about to turn 20, and when she turned 18, she got her first boyfriend. And so I'm a sex educator, right? I've been talking to her about her body and about sexuality since she was born, right? And so I think that she's well prepared. I also thought that I would know when she'd had sex for the first time, because a mother just knows these things, but I couldn't tell. So I asked her about it, and she said, well, Mom, I don't want to talk with you about that. And I said, well, have you kissed? And she said, Mom, yes. And then I said, well, have you done more than kiss? Mom, yes. And then I said, have you had intercourse yet? Mom, back off. And I said, well, the reason I'm asking is because I remember when I first started kissing, how much energy I had in my body with that. I felt my face get hot. I felt this energy running all through my body, and it was really exciting, but it was really scary all at the same time. And I really liked it, but I was really scared about it, and I wanted to do more, but I was kind of afraid of what more would be. And it just all felt so big. And she said, how did you know? So I think it's like that for us as we recover from cancer. It's a whole new territory. Our body is completely different. And so if we can approach it with beginner's mind, then something really magical and interesting can happen. So once you learn what you like, what feels good, and you're ready to communicate with your partner, if you have a partner, let's talk about communication. Because my belief is that communication is the best lubrication. So, as a sex educator, I can tell you there are hundreds of lubricants available on the market. Excuse me, and they're formulated for all different purposes, and they work well. But underneath all that, if you don't have good communication with your partner, the lubricants may not work so well. So the thing about this is, think back to how and when you learned about sex. You might have had a sex education class in high school or a hygiene class, and it was probably some basic biology about how reproduction happens and some warnings about be careful of STDs, don't get pregnant. And that was about it, right? And so then we might have, with the neighborhood kids, we might have gotten a Playboy magazine, or they might have told us what they know. But, you know, basically it was the blind leading the blind. At least that was my experience, and many, many people I talked to. And then as we get older, as an adult, there's a lot of resources available to us. There's some really good books. There's some good movies. There are sex therapists. There's people like, well, not too many people like me, but there's me. And even though people have these resources, what I found is that even reading a book or seeing a movie, when you're still left on your own to try to implement it, it's a whole different story. And what do you do? And how do you communicate to your partner? First of all, how do you know what you want and need and know that it's okay? And then how do you communicate that to your partner? And how do you hear what they actually want? So this is why I say communication is the best lubrication. And most of us feel like, well, our partner should just know what we want. Like, how many of you have ever had this thought? If he or she really loved me, they'd just know. I think some of you are lying. Anyway, then we can feel like having to talk and be really specific about what we want can take all the spontaneity out of it. Or if our partner's telling us really specifically about what they want, that there's something wrong with us, or we're being critical or being judged in some way. And on top of all that, we don't have a good language for sexuality. So it's just kind of hard to know where to go with all this. So I think the first thing to do is to know that it can feel a little awkward and a little uncomfortable talking about sex. But there's some things that you can do, and there's just a quick exercise I want to do right now. So turn and pair up with somebody who's sitting next to you. And if you're here with your partner, please sit with your partner, facing your partner. Literally turn your chairs so you're facing each other. Okay, everybody got a partner that wants a partner? Okay. Okay, listen. Shh. So this is a communication exercise. And you're each going to have a chance to speak, and you're each going to have a chance to listen. So take a moment right now and choose a partner A and a partner B. Doesn't matter which, you're both going to have a chance to go. Okay? Partner A's, raise your hand. Good. Partner B's, raise your hand. All right, good. And you've got a C? I know there's some threesomes. Okay, so here I want to coach you a little bit about the speaking and listening. So first of all, when you're listening to your partner, my suggestion is that you listen not only with your ears, but that you open your heart, as if your heart had ears as well, so that you can just drink in and receive and accept what this person is saying to you. Because most of us don't communicate that way. In a conversation, we're really busy figuring out how to solve the problem or how we're going to respond, and it takes us right away from being in the present moment. So in this case, you're not going to respond. There's no problem to solve. Your job is just to listen and receive. And really, giving someone that gift is a huge, huge gift. Then, when you're speaking, then the invitation is for you to be really vulnerable and open and honest, so that not the kind of stuff you'd talk about at a party of where do you live, what was your diagnosis, that kind of stuff. It's really about if you were going to communicate and express the essence, the deepest essence of who you are as a person to to this partner, what would you want them to know about you? So, for example, if I was doing it, I might say things like, even though I love this work, and if you, so it's completing a sentence, if you really knew me. So I would say, if you really knew me, you'd know that even though I'm really passionate about this work, every time I give a talk like this, I get nervous because I'm afraid somebody's going to run out of the room, that I've offended in some way. If you really knew me, you'd know that I'm really concerned about my daughter and this first love because her boyfriend's an alcoholic. If you really knew me, you'd know that I haven't spoken to my mother for a year, and it's very painful for me because she doesn't want to talk to me. So things like that, that wouldn't normally come up in a conversation, but that really are essential qualities or things that are really big for you in your life. Get the idea? Okay, so we're going to start with partner A, and you're going to go first, and you're going to complete this sentence, if you really knew me. And then I'm going to manage the time, so you'll know when to stop and when to switch. So partner B, open your ears, open your heart, get ready to receive, and partner A's, please begin. If you really knew me. Okay, and partner A, one more sentence, if you really knew me, and then bring your words to a close. Okay, and please stop talking. And then take a breath together. And notice how you're feeling, having spoken what you've just spoken and having heard what you've just heard if you were the listener, and how that feels inside you. And now we're going to switch. So partner B, for you, again, completing this sentence, if you really knew me, and partner A's, open your ears as well as your heart as you receive this great gift. Please begin. Okay, partner B, one last sentence, if you really knew me. And then when you complete that, let your words come to a close. And please stop talking. Just let the words fall away for now. And now look into each other's eyes. Just look into your partner's eyes and take a breath and notice how you're feeling about that. Was that intimacy? Was that good? Did you like it? Was it weird? So creating that kind of intimacy, that kind of communication is as easy as it can be. Okay, so these are all tools to give you the basic foundation. So turn back this way because I have lots more I want to tell you. So now that you've laid that inner foundation, it's time for some power tools. Are you ready? Okay, so some power tools to reignite your intimacy and your sexuality. And I'm going to go through these really fast because I've been talking too much. So tips and tools for you. The first one is make some agreements. So I suggest that you sit down on a regular basis with your partner, if you have one, or with your journal, if you're single, and write or talk about intimacy and sexuality. And when I say make agreements, what I mean is agree that as you have these conversations that you're going to be gentle and tender with each other and with yourself. Because a lot of us don't have the language to talk well about intimacy and sexuality, and it can feel awkward. Also, make an agreement that when one person is speaking, the other person is going to listen, like you just experienced. When one's mouth is open, the other's mouth is closed. There's something that's very powerful about that when we feel really heard. The next is to have some regular practices, and the best practice that I can give you is called reflective listening. So that is when you listen to what the person you're talking with is saying, you're not only listening for the words, but for the feeling behind what they're saying and looking at their body language. And then after they've said a little bit, then reflect back what you heard and what you think they're feeling. And ask them, is that what you meant to communicate? And they'll tell you. And if there's more, then be curious and let them tell you more. And then, after you've done that, share your sex history. What do I mean by that? Well, take a breath and relax, because some people just got a little nervous. So, this is a great way to begin a conversation about intimacy and sexuality. And whether you've been with your partner for a short time or a long time, you might learn some things here, and it really can open up the doors to intimacy. So my suggestion is that you take an afternoon or an evening when you won't be disturbed, that you sit close to each other on the couch or someplace comfortable, you light a candle or play some soft background music, and then one person shares and the other listens. And it's about sharing things like your first sexual experience, however you define that. Share about your first kissing or petting or going further than that. Share about your masturbation experiences, if you've had any. Share if you got caught playing doctor or masturbating and what that was like. Share about your first orgasm, if you've had one. Share about any experimenting that you've done with toys, with oral sex, with anal sex, with same-sex partners, with anything that comes to mind. Share about any sexual wounding that you have and what happened. Share any sexual secrets that you have. And share about how cancer has impacted you in an intimate and sexual way. And then share about what makes you feel good and what not so much. And as you listen to each other, listen with all your compassion and your caring, because this may be stuff that the person you're talking with has never shared before, and it may be stuff that you've never shared before. And there's something about this that if you're curious and open to this, it's a very powerful experience. It's one that when I was single and dating, I always talked with my dates about. It was a great doorway into intimacy and sexuality. And then when you're both finished talking, just take a few breaths and look into each other's eyes and then appreciate each other for what you've just spoken and what you've just heard. Next, have a weekly sex date. And I mean, put this on your calendar and have it either with yourself or with a partner if you have one. And the idea here is to talk about sex, preferably not when you're trying to have sex, but with your clothes on and talking about what your body feels like now, what your concerns and fears are, what questions you have for your sweetheart, asking what they might like in terms of intimacy and sexuality and touch. And practice that reflective listening that I just talked about. And while you're doing this, if you want to jot down a note or two about what they're saying that they'd like, and have them jot down a note or two about you, then you can agree after that to take one of those things on the list and try it out for a few days and see how it goes. You get the idea. Then another really powerful practice is other course, which means not intercourse. So there's a lot of things that you can do that don't involve your genitals that are very sexy. And when we take the intercourse out of the equation, especially if our body's not working the way it did before, it really takes the pressure off. When we're not so focused on a race to the finish line of orgasm, very different things can happen. So I'm running out of time here. Darn. So the last thing I want to talk about is your most powerful sex organ, which is your brain. So just to demonstrate how powerful your brain is, take a breath and close your eyes. And this is a little visualization, so you might not actually see something, you might just hear it and get the idea, but if you see something, that's fine. So imagine that you're holding a half of a lemon in your hand. And look at the yellow color and smell the scent of the lemon. And then bring that lemon up to your lips and take a big juicy suck out of that lemon and suck the juice into your mouth and feel it running down your throat. So you can hear I'm salivating as I'm saying this. So take a breath and open your eyes. So look in your hand. Is there a lemon there? No. But how many of you, your lips puckered up, or you started to salivate, or you had a physical response, right? That's because your brain doesn't differentiate between what it's thinking and what's really, really happening. So you can use your brain as a very powerful tool to make the decision to be intimate or to be sexual, especially now if your libido is a little lower. It takes that mental decision to actually get yourself in the mindset to be intimate. And you can start by talking about all these conversations that we've had. Okay, so quick question for reflection, and then I will open it up for Q&A. So what are the aspects of your sexuality, based on what I just talked about, that you want to focus on first? And are you willing to spend time to renew yourself and come back to wholeness? This can be challenging, and it can also be an adventure into pleasure. So now if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and otherwise I'll keep talking because I have more I can say.
We know the first person's going to be shy. But
you could ask Victoria, too, if you'd rather ask her than me.
There we go. Thank you.
I guess it's like when I was pregnant and we had to make love in a different position because I had this giant big belly.
Yeah.
And so I've had to move back into previous periods to kind of recapture some type of activity that is sensual.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's the hard part. Plus, there's the pain that is present that certainly precludes some ranges of activity for me.
Right.
My partner doesn't know how to touch me because he doesn't want to hurt me.
Right.
This is a big deal.
Right, right. So how many of you partners in here are afraid you're going to hurt your sweetie touching her or him? Yeah, yeah. So that's why, thank you for that question. That's why I say that communication is the best lubrication, and why it's really important for you to get to know your body and what does feel good, so that you can start in places like that. And there's a practice that my sweetie and I do every week, which I'll share with you, which you might want to use as a starting place. So we just take orgasm completely off the table, because we don't want to be on that race to the finish, but we take our clothes off and we get into bed and we lie facing each other and we just look into each other's eyes and take a few deep breaths until we feel connected, not just in our eyes, but in our hearts and energetically. And then we just see what inspires us. So sometimes that might be more eye-gazing, sometimes it's kissing, sometimes it's massage, sometimes it's touch, sometimes it's intercourse, but never with an end goal in mind. And we also have an agreement that anywhere along the way, if what we're doing doesn't feel good to either one of us, we stop. So there's something about that, about doing that on a regular basis and having the safety and the commitment to doing that and being tender with each other, that's very powerful. So you might want to try something like that. Any other questions? Really? Kim, do you have any questions? Yeah, there is hope. There definitely is hope. Yes? Me? Oh. Well, somebody's got a microphone, Kim, so hang on a sec.
I've been reading up a little bit on the article that you suggested to me about how to get your vagina and vulva kind of back in shape and flexible again. And it's working, except that if all my hormones have been taken away from me, don't you need estrogen to work along with it?
Well,
even topically?
You know, no, not necessarily. And it's just really, really different. So that what Jenna Sarr is talking about is I referred her to an article. It's called the Vaginal Renewal Program. And it's on a website called A Woman's Touch, which is a wonderful, wonderful website. They sell products and they have lots of good information. And this is a 3-part program that you do over weeks or months, even if you need to, whatever feels right to you. It starts with using a moisturizing lubricant that you put all around. And then it's a massaging, and with the massaging, it's like a touch and release thing. And what you're doing all around externally is you're increasing the lymphatic and the blood flow into your vaginal tissues, because a lot of times, because the tissue is not so elastic, the blood and lymph isn't flowing so well in it. And then the third part is internal massage, and that's to use a wand that vibrates, and they come in different sizes. And just to insert it and let it vibrate for 5 minutes, because that's to do the internal massage. And all of that adds up to helping the tissue become more flexible and more elastic. And I know you've just started that, Jenna Sarr, so give it a few weeks. And that's why I'm saying also that your brain is a really powerful organ here, because it oftentimes requires a decision to go there. And I know from people I've talked with, many women are able to respond if their partner initiates and they can say what they want and need. But as far as them initiating, that's maybe not going to happen unless they make this decision and make this commitment to do it. Because it's really kind of like use it or lose it. You know, you can rehabilitate yourself with this vaginal renewal program that I'm talking about, but it takes some time. But it's different now. Yes. Need a microphone over here?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, you talked about in mirror practices, you know, loving yourself. And our society emphasizes, you know, thin bodies, beautiful bodies, young is beautiful. How do you actually go from when all the changes that have occurred to your body, physical changes, and you're looking in the mirror naked, how do you get to that point of loving yourself when society tells you else, you know,
right.
all these other contradictions?
Right, right. And we have such a focus in this culture on our tatas, right? Look at the décolletage, the pinups, all that sort of stuff. And so we may know that we don't fit that narrowly defined media image of what's pretty and sexy anymore. And that's why the mirror work is so powerful, because it's all about reconnecting with you, and it takes some time to do that. So, I mean, do you think I'm sexy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he does. But, you know, I turned 60 this year, and you know, I've got wrinkles and all that sort of stuff, and things don't work in the same way that they did. But I've done this mirror practice many, many times and come to peace with myself and who I am now. And I have to tell you that I'm having a better intimate and sexual life now than when I was much younger, and certainly before cancer. So it really requires your commitment and your devotion to doing some things and to believing that it can happen. Because what the mirror practice helps you do is to stop drinking the Kool-Aid that we have to look a certain way to be beautiful. We're really programmed by the media messages about that. You're right, but we can change that. Who else has a microphone?
I do.
Oh,
so I was going to say, so just for me to even say this into a group of strangers, I'm just offering myself to be an example of that we should not be embarrassed about our sexuality, because to me it's such a huge part of our life force energy, our existence of who we are. And when we're in touch with our energy of who we are as women, and men too, we spread joy and love around us in such ways that's so powerful. So I just wanted to say that much. So I got diagnosed 2 years ago, and I'm like active and healthy and fit, and my whole life I've been doing the right thing, and it was like, you got to be kidding me, breast cancer, oh my God. But I was more afraid not of the cancer, because I'm a strong person, I know I could deal with that. I was more afraid of, oh my gosh, I'm going to be damaged goods. I'm 50 and single, and I'm a discard out in the pasture. And really, that was like a fear so strong that I had to do some major mental affirmations around this. So that's when Barbara said, what's the most powerful organ in your body? I'm like, yeah, the brain, because for me, that was the huge leap and the big, that was my big lesson, like, don't let those negative thoughts overtake you. And so this past year, I just did a lot of affirmations for myself, and I totally attracted this amazing man in my life who's been through somebody with cancer, so he totally gets it about all of these, non-fully functioning abilities in the body. So I just wanted to say it's possible to manage. I'm in the process right now.
Yeah, so can I tell a little more?
Sure.
So Kim called me and told me about this new boyfriend and said, now what do I do? It hurts. And that's when we had a really interesting conversation, because it's one thing to do all this foundational work, and then to actually live your life is a whole different thing. But doing all these practices really helps. It really does. Yes, please.
For me, what it reminds me of is that number one is always the willingness to be where we are. And I think that's the hard part. And I find that the opposite of libido is pressure. Mm. You know, there's absolutely nothing flowing. If I think I should have sex, if I think he thinks that I should, or, you know, anything in between. Mm-hmm. And yet, having been through chemotherapy, I really witnessed that this was not just emotional. This is actually really physical. Right. I happen to have the grace of having the greatest partner I've ever had in my life with sex. And a lot of all the different practices that you mentioned, even though I didn't know they existed, most of them, 9 out of 10, we've actually done over the years.
Great.
And yet there's something, like when I started drying up, and we, you know, it's really concrete like that. I even said to him, I said, how the fuck do I even know that I want sex? Mm-hmm. I said, it's kind of like if you had a, you know, you could take something, you could take a Viagra, and then you can get it going. But do you know that you want sex? Mm-hmm. And part of what excites us, I think, as women is the feeling of our own fluidity. Mm-hmm. So how can we get that when we're drying out? And I think that's something that just starts again with the acknowledging of the grief of what's here. Right. And then slowly moving into, are there other ways of being fluid? Yep. And a lot of that, what you mentioned, emotional and so forth. But I just wanted to bring back that for me, it's kind of like coming to that bare bone, rock bottom ground first and saying yes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's what I mean when I say accepting where you are. Right. And feeling whatever those feelings are, because it's really hard if we have an expectation that we're going to go back to the way that we were, or if we don't acknowledge the grief and sadness about where we are now. But what I'm saying is that there's also an opportunity in that. And that it takes some work. There's no question about that. And it's very different. I mean, the quality of my orgasms is way different, but I still have them.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that we never know what the future holds either.
That's right.
And for whatever reason, now I am fluid again, even though I'm still menopausal, and my libido is coming up. So that too, you know, nothing is forever. It all can change.
That's right.
Either way.
That's right. And libido doesn't die with menopause.
Yeah, like that.
We have time for one final question, if anyone had one. All right.
Okay, so I want to leave you with something, and that is that I talked about a lot. There's a lot you can do here, and it takes some work, and it's a process. So a good place to start is I've written a book, as Karen mentioned, and I have some in the Resource Center, so come and get a book. Stop by our table, and you can find out. I have some courses that I'm offering, and also this afternoon I'm offering some private one-on-one 15-minute sessions with me if you'd like one of those. There's one spot left, but if you want one and we can't do it today, I have a form that you can fill out, and we can do it on the phone.